I'm Joseph Haldane, Executive Director of the International Academic Forum, IAFOR, the organising body behind this year's European Conference on Education, and I'm joined today by Professor Sue Jackson, who's Pro-Vice Master of Learning and Teaching at Birkbeck College, University of London. Professor Jackson, thank you very much for joining me today. We're here at the European Conference on Education, and we've just, in fact, had the plenary session, and people from 250 delegates from over 50 different countries have joined us around a conference theme that looks at transforming and transformative practices within education. Perhaps you can say something more about the conference theme, because you yourself devised it.
The conference theme is about transforming and changing education, and I like to think about that in two different ways. One is the power that education has to transform and to change us as individuals, but also to transform and change communities, states, to have a very big impact. The other way of thinking about transforming and changing education is how we might want to change education and transform it into something different. So that seemed really important to me in thinking about those issues from an international and intercultural perspective, as well as an interdisciplinary one, drawing on the numbers of delegates that we have here, as you said, around 250 from 50 different countries. So to think what that means for the sub-theme of the borderlands of becoming and belonging, I think is really important to give us that range of different perspectives and challenge some thinking.
So you yourself, in fact, have been engaged in education for a number of years now, but access, open and distance education, in fact, some of the ways in which education transforms, and Birkbeck's a leader in those sort of non-traditional education practices. You're Pro-Vice Master for Learning and Teaching, but you weren't always. Can you give us a bit of a background in your educational journey and the transformations that you've seen?
Yes, I think I've had to cross lots of borders in my own educational journey, having left school at 15 with no qualifications and not much liking for education, actually. I felt very alienated from it, quite marginalised from the process. And so it was only as an adult that I started to engage on my own meaningful educational journey, where I enrolled with the Open University for my undergraduate degree and then went on from that stage onwards. And I think it was the OU that enabled me to think about the transformative nature of education, because it absolutely changed me in that process. And in part, it wasn't just what I learned, but it was the ability to be able to engage with education, to be able to study in my own time, at my own pace. And that's what's so important for us at Birkbeck, to think about flexible learning, so that most of our students who are working in the daytime or caring or who have other responsibilities and come to us in the evening can still access education in whatever way they want to do that. So it was a long journey for me through that accessing of education, through my own learning and development, through some different jobs, part-time, hourly paid, till I finally reached Birkbeck about 10 or 11 years ago, which felt like home to me because of the nature of our part-time mature students that we have at Birkbeck.
So Birkbeck, in fact, is one of these institutions which has for a long time been involved in open distance access education. But these sorts of non-traditional forms of education are in fact becoming the mainstream, the norm. And we're finding all over the world different, for example, Harvard X, the MOOCs, etc. There's a number of non-traditional forms of education which are coming into being. In fact, the International Academic Forum, IAFOR, is one of those non-traditional platforms which wouldn't have been possible 5, even 10 years ago, perhaps. So I was wondering if you might comment on how these different transformative processes have changed society, have changed the way in which we engage with each other and with education.
I'm not sure that they have really changed society. I think that although there are many opportunities to engage in learning in different ways now, it is often assumed, nearly always assumed, I think, that the learner, the student, is still 18 years old or so and still accessing education on a full-time basis. So opportunities that there are for learners outside of that tend to be add-ons, unless of course you're at a place like Birkbeck where it's the core of our business. But in many institutions, the mode is full-time and young, and if you don't fit that, you fit yourself in somehow, rather than being central to the work of the university. And I think that is an issue with MOOCs too, because although they are very attractive to people who are working, they are mainly accessed by people who already have a degree and who are used to those educational structures and aren't as supportive, don't have the pedagogic sounding and background to them to support non-traditional learners.
So many of these questions, in fact, of access, power, they're still very much as relevant today, even though the platforms have changed somewhat, we're still there with the same questions. And I think in this conference, we've already seen a number of speakers address those different sort of questions, and I'm hoping that as the weekend goes on, we're going to have more reflections on these questions from different research perspectives and of course from different cultures. This brings me to my next question, and that's the International Academic Forum, and perhaps you could say a bit on how long you've been involved with IAFOR and what it's come to mean to you and within your sort of research programme.
Another journey, I think, for me. So literally in the first place, because I was invited to the very first Asian Conference on Education in Osaka in 2009, and that was a journey across the sea, halfway across the world to get to Japan, but also a real journey in what I found there. Because when I arrived, what I found was something very different from other education conferences that I'd been to. It was a real challenge to me in the way that there was explicit discussion of the dominance of Western paradigms, for example. There was real explicit discussion about critiques of knowledge and of claims to truth, and that came from the wide range of participants that there were. So my initial coming to the conference was to come to what seemed an interesting conference, but without knowing anything about IAFOR. Since then, of course, I've learned a lot about IAFOR, and I've been involved with the conferences since then, seen the European conferences grow and the North American conference start to develop, and have become more engaged with IAFOR, with my own role as conference chair and as becoming a research director in the education research work of IAFOR. So it's meant a great deal to me in its values, its mission, its ethos.
Well, wonderful. Well, let's now look then at the future, because it's a very exciting future where we're engaged in different events in, of course, different parts of the world, but we're still with the education, and under your leadership, we're still trying to theoretically join these, if you like, and have this discussion which happens over different events and through different media.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I've tried to do over the last couple of years since we started the European conferences and moving into the North American is to have a uniting theme across the conferences. What we haven't done yet is to find ways to have conversations between those conferences and to join and link them. And I think that will be the next role of the work of IAFOR or the Education Research Institute of IAFOR, to think how we can bring those together.
Well, that's great, and we're very happy that you continue to be so engaged. We're now 5 years into this this joint project, and it's been good to see the university partnerships that IAFOR is involved with grow, and we look forward to doing things not just bigger and better, but in going in different directions and in new directions and involving more people in the discussions. Well, Professor Jackson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to this interview, and I very much hope that your interest in IAFOR may be piqued, and that you can look on our website www.iafor.org, where you can see our latest research, publications and events. Thank you very much.